All right. Quadratic function. To be a quadratic, you have to have a squared term. So a lot of times, the quadratic function is written in this form. We call it standard form. Standard form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We've actually seen some of these, but we've seen vertex form is what we got done with, where you can look at it and figure out the vertex. But now it might be something like this. Y equals x squared plus 2x plus 1. Or x squared plus 2x. That might be all it is. That's still an ABC form. You look here, and in this case, a would be 1 if there's no number there. Sometimes there's a number in front. It might say 4x squared. Well, then a is 4. But here, a is 1. If it's negative, well, then a is negative 1. Okay? So we look at that, and we can identify what we call a, b, and c. So here, y equals 2x squared plus 4x plus 7. A is therefore 2. It's the coefficient, the number in front of the x squared term. B is 4, and C is 7. So one of the first things you need to be able to look and identify A, B, and C. A is always the value on the x squared term. B is the value on the x term, and C is the value here. If you don't see a C, well, then you put down the value for nothing. Then C must be 0, because there isn't one. And we can have a lot of different things. We can have y equals x squared plus 7. Well, this one usually throws students off, but a would be 1, because on the x squared, that's 1. B is 0, and C is 7, because B is the value on the x term. We don't see a term that has x in it. So this, the 7, has to be the C, and then B, there's 0 x's there. So that's what we have. Now what you can't have is you can't have a 0 on the x squared term. So we can't have like this, y equals 2x plus 7, and say, well, b is 2, and c is 7. You're kind of right, but here's where you're wrong. There is no x squared, so that one's not even a quadratic. You have to have an x squared term. You can't have a 0 on that and say a is 0, because then you don't even have one of these parabolas. Now we have a formula for the axis of symmetry. In the past, we've been able to look and say the axis of symmetry matches the x term. That's still true on the vertex. But now you're going to look and you're going to take x and you're going to set it to negative b over 2a. And you're going to put in the values for b and a. And that's what the lesson today is going to be about, is finding that value. Once you get x, you're going to have something like, oh, x is 3. All that might come down to 3. And we'll see as we put some numbers in, it might come down. Then we're going to take the 3 and we're going to substitute it back in anywhere we see an x. There'll be a couple places we'll put it in for x. Okay, so we're just going to kind of jump in and we're going to look at this. The first thing in example 1 that I want to do is I want to identify A, B, and C. And then we're going to find the axis of symmetry. We're going to find the vertex. So A is 3. What's B? Be specific. Negative 6. Good job. C is 5. So the first thing to do these problems, you have to be able to identify A, B, and C. Thank you. And our axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is a formula. The formula is x equals negative b over 2a. So part of the formula, b has to be negative. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to put them in, but I'm going to put them in parentheses. Negative b over 2a. Now all I did first is I took out the a and the b. We said b is negative 6, so I'm going to put negative 6 in there. Now notice it's negative 6. A negative times a negative is a positive. So a lot of students think, well, it's just only negative. No, the formula has a negative, and then we said B is negative. So those are going to negate each other, and a negative times a negative becomes a positive. Okay, for A, we understand A is 3. So if we were to do this, we would get positive 6 over 6, and 6 divided by 6 is 1. Now you can do that in your calculator if you want. One of the nice advantages of the calculator we have, of course, is we can put a control divide, and we could say, all right, it's negative 6 over 2 times 3. We could type it in exactly as we see it. And negative 6 is positive 6 over 2 times 3 is 6. We get the same thing. Now notice how the calculator left it negative 6. That's kind of handy because then we get the idea. Negative times a negative is a positive. But all that became 1. Okay? Now, this is the long way to figure out the vertex because it's in a different form than we had last chapter. Last chapter, it was easier to see the vertex, but this is a different form, so we have to do a little more work. Now, our vertex, since our axis is x equals 1, our vertex is at 1 comma something. We figured out x is 1. That process is to help us figure out x is 1. And it looks kind of long, but as you go, you can do a lot of that in your head, and that's possible. But now what we have to do is we have to take this formula, this equation, and we have to put 1 in and figure out y. Y equals 3 times x squared minus 6 times x plus 5. We are now going to, what I said on the first page, we're going to substitute for x. So in substituting for x, we're going to put the 1 in there for all of those. So now, how do I put it in there? What I usually do is take our calculator and type it in. You could use a Chromebook too. But we're not looking very calculator ready here. So let me help us out on this magnificent Friday. All right, so everybody press the on button. When you press the on button, usually right away I recommend we press the number 1. We do a new document. We don't want to save. Then we add a calculator page. Okay? Everybody up and running? All right. Now type in the 3 and put a parenthesis. We put in the 1, and then we square it. All I'm doing is I'm typing the equation, but instead of x's, I'm putting those things in. And whenever I put in an x, I put in parentheses. So then minus 6. Excuse me. Minus 6 times 1. Thank you. Plus 5. Okay, so get it typed in. Look at the equation. Look at mine. I'm giving us time, making sure we type it in. It's good practice. And all we did is we put the 1 in everywhere we saw an x. There's 2 places we see an x. The one place it squares it, the one place it doesn't. And the calculator will get us 2. Now again, look, the parentheses disappear. Parentheses disappear when we hit enter. So I don't like that because then we don't see what we did. That whenever I put in the 1, I put it in parentheses. So did everybody get it to work out and get 2 on your calculator screen? Typing it in like I have underneath there? No? Should still work. Oh, yeah. So replace it, yeah, with a minus. I get what you're saying. Because then what it did is it multiplied it. It's still minus. There we go. All right, anybody else didn't get it? Did you get it? Yep. Yep. Check later. Yep. Okay. So now what does that mean? When we put it in, we got 2. 2. That's where the vertex is. 1, 2. All right, well, let's go over to this one. We're going to find it. So first of all, A, B, and C. What is A in part B? 2. What is B? Trick question. Do you see an X? So what's B? 0. And C is -6. So make sure you can identify A, B, and C. And you have to know the rules. There will always be an A. Sometimes there's a B. Sometimes there's a C. If you don't see it, then it's 0. Okay? So now, what's our axis of symmetry? Our axis of symmetry is X equals. I recommend that you write it -b over 2a, and then you write it again, -parenthesis over 2 parenthesis. Now, once you get used to it, then you don't have to write it. A lot of people think, well, why do you want to make me show work? Okay, I'm teaching you the formula. Eventually, I don't need you to show this. Right now, we're learning it, so it's good to understand why we're putting that down. If you get it already and you can jump straight to this step, great. But this is the part I would like to see. Minus B, which is 0, over 2a, which is 3. What's -0? 0. What's 2 times 3? 6. What's 0 divided by 6? 0 divided by 6? Still 0. So if you were to type it in the calculator, is what? Oh, the 3 is supposed to be a 2. Yep. Good catch. So it's supposed to be 2 times 2. Gets us 4. Now 0 divided by 4 is still 0. But I made a mistake and put in a 3 for some reason there. I don't know why. Maybe I looked back at the last problem accidentally. Okay. So it should have been 4, but 0 divided by 4 is still 0. So thank you for catching that. Good job. Now what we know, our axis is 0 something. So we have to put the 0 in. So we take our formula. Everybody on your calculator page, we go 2 parentheses 0 squared minus 6. You get -6. All right, now it says graph the function. Okay? So graphing the function is going to involve finding the axis, finding the vertex, talking about domain. We can talk about range too. But then, and we will, determining if it opens up, down, max, or min. So we're going to jump in here. And one of the first things we're going to do, we're going to talk about graphing this one. We're going to find A, B, and C. So right above this, I'm going to say A, B, C. And we're going to write those down. And why don't we go through for each of these problems and put down A, B, and C quickly. What's A? -1. What's B? 4. What's C? -2. Now you notice in our formula we never use C, but there's still a point in identifying it, so we know not to use that number because it's not in the formula. This one, what's A? 3, 6, 2. This one? -8 and -3. Okay. Now, we're going to find the axis of symmetry. So down here, in terms of the axis, we're going to use those numbers. X equals, now up here, I'm going to write the formula once. Minus B over 2A, and I'm going to go minus parenthesis over 2 parentheses. So I took out the A and B, and now all I have to do is take the A and B and put them in. So we're going to find the axis for all three of these. Minus B over 2A, x equals minus B over 2A. So we go up to where we found those. We had 4 over 2 times -1. Now that's -4 over -2. What's -4 over -2? Going to be positive. 2. Now you can type it in the calculator, but a lot of that you should be able to do in your head. The goal is to get that and figure out that the axis of symmetry is 2. That means our vertex is 2 comma something. When you get the axis of symmetry, you get the x value of the vertex. 2 comma something. So try the axis of symmetry for the next 2. Type them in your calculator as needed. See if you can get the axis. We're just going to do the axis right now. Focus on that for all 3 of these. I'll give us a moment. Those watching online, if you do, then you can do this. Fast forward if you get to that point, or take this time as well. You should be trying it as well if you're watching online. So we should get a 6 over 3. It's -6 over +6. What does -6 over +6 get? -1. So that's our x value. So notice I put it in for our x value for our vertex right away, -1. Here, this one, -8 over -2. So this becomes positive 8 over negative 4. So all that becomes negative 2. That formula up here, the x equals minus b over 2a, that formula gives us the x coordinate. Okay, now we take our 2 and we have to put it into our equation. So up here we look at our equation and we're going to put 2 in. So use your calculator to do this. It says negative x squared. So on our calculator, I'm going to put the negative. Now this negative sign on the bottom, you see that in red as it lights up. Negative parenthesis 2 squared. Then, what's the next part of the formula? The next part says plus 4x. So we go plus 4 parenthesis 2. Anytime I say x, I'm putting in 2 now because we found x to be 2. And then it says minus 2. So we let our calculator do the work. You could try to do that in your head, and that's fine. But when we put in 2, we get 2. So it tells us that it's 2 comma 2 is the vertex. Okay? So let's try this one over here now. Let's get the vertex. We're going to put in negative 1 into this equation up here. So 3, everybody type a 3 in your calculator. Now we need x squared, so we put a parenthesis. And we put negative 1. Squared plus 6 parenthesis negative 1 plus 2. Okay, when we put that in, everybody should get negative 1. Interesting. So far we put in 2, we got 2. We put in negative 1, we get negative 1. That's coincidence. We might say, well, we're going to put in negative 2 and get negative 2. Maybe, but I don't think so. We'll see. So in this one, negative 2 parenthesis negative 2 squared. Whoops. Got to get on the outside of the parenthesis. Minus 8. Make sure you use the minus here, not the negative, because if you use the negative, it'll multiply it. Times negative 2. We found that out. At least one of us so far, right? We learned from experience. That's good. Minus 3. Gets us 5. Yeah. So again, like I said, coincidence, but that one's 5. You don't want it to work out that way all the time, because then we think, oh, well, if whatever I put in is what I get out. That's not true. Okay. It can be. All right. So now we found the vertex. So everybody, now we're going to graph the vertex. This one, we're going to graph 2, 2. So we're going to go 2 over, 2 up, put a dot. Okay, now let's look. This one, how do I graph it? Is it going to open up or down? Down. So that value for A is negative 1. So what I'm going to go is I'm going to go down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. If you remember, we talked about that in the last part. And I'm going to put my graph. So since it opens down, is this a maximum? Is it a high point, maximum, or a low point, minimum? Which one? It's the biggest. That's the highest it gets. That's the maximum. Make sense? Okay. Our domain is all reals, and our range hasn't changed. Y is less than or equal to whatever our Y value was, 2. Okay, next one. -1, -1. Put a dot. Whoops, missed it. Down 1 here. -1, -1, dot right there. Trying to make it a little bigger. Look at A now. A is 3 over 1. It's positive, so it opens up. So let's all go up 3, and 1 to the left, and 1 to the right. And that's our graph. Now, is this a maximum or a minimum point? Minimum, good. Our domain is still all reals, but our range is now Y is greater than or equal to what? -1. Still look at the Y coordinate. All right. -2, 5. -2, +5. We go down 2 and 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Whoop. And we graph it. Maximum or minimum point? Maximum, good. Domain is still all reals. Range is Y is less than or equal to 5. Okay, you see a lot of similarities once we get to that point to the last unit, right? We are calling that done for now.